Hello! Welcome to our next Holes recap. Chapters 21 to 28. What a great group of chapters they were. Stanley cannot believe what has just happened with the warden and Mr. Sir. Mr. Sir will never forgive him, and he's going to be digging for hours because of the time it took him to go to the warden's cabin. Oh my goodness. He starts thinking on the way back to his hole, oh, my great-grandfather was robbed and he survived for 17 days in the desert. He said he found refuge on God's thumb. Refuge means safety. God's thumb, I wonder what that means. He's so deep in thought about his grandfather, he almost steps on a rattlesnake. Yikes. When he gets back to his hole, he sees that it's been dug for him. It's almost done. He thinks that maybe the boys have done it to thank him for taking the blame. Hey, my hole is almost finished. They must have done it to thank me. But none of the boys take credit. They didn't help him at all. It was Zero. Zero dug all of Stanley's home and he's barely begun his own. How about that? Way to go, Zero. Stanley goes over to Zero and he asks him, why did you help me? Why did you dig my hole for me? And he says, well, you didn't steal the sunflower seeds. And Stanley goes, well, neither did you. And then he says, you didn't steal the sneakers. Remember, Stanley's at Camp Green Lake because he's accused of stealing sneakers. And Zero knows, hey, Stanley didn't do it. Zero believes Stanley. Zero's a pretty cool dude. So Stanley helps him. Zero doesn't even know the alphabet, but he learns it pretty quickly. Turns out Zero's a pretty bright kid and he knows his math. So Stanley's going to tutor him. Here's the deal. Stanley will teach Zero more letters every day, and in return, Zero's going to dig some of Stanley's hole. This way, Stanley will have more energy for teaching. I don't know. It sounds like a fair trade to me. What do you think? You think that's fair? Well, later that night, Stanley is laying in bed worrying. What else is new? That's all he ever does is worry. What will X-Ray think about the fact that Zero's helping him dig his hole? Is X-Ray going to be mad? Remember, he's the leader of those kids. And Stanley starts thinking about his meeting with the warden. Her red nail polish, her makeup kit, and BAM! Suddenly, Stanley remembers what that gold tube was. He realizes that that gold tube was part of a lipstick tube. The initials on the bottom of the tube are KB. What if this tube might have belonged to Kissing Kate Barlow, the outlaw who robbed Stanley's great-grandfather? OMG. Could it be? Let's go back to 110 years before Camp Green Lake even existed. At that time, Green Lake actually was a lake with a lovely, all-American kind of town on its banks. Sounds pretty, right? The town school teacher was named Miss Catherine Barlow. She was famous for her canned peaches and her beauty. She taught an adult education class in the evening, and it was filled with young men, many of them who were interested in the teacher instead of getting an education. They were all going there trying to get a date with her. One of the men in Miss Catherine's class is Charles Walker, the son of the richest man in town. He's known around town as Trout because his 2 feet smelled like a couple of dead fish. Yuck! Trout's a kind of fish. Imagine that's your nickname, Trout, because you smell like dead fish. Yikes. Actually, Trout's feet smell because he has an incurable foot fungus. The same one that Clive Livingston will have 110 years later. Remember? Stanley said his shoes were really smelly. That's why he was taking them home to his dad. Anyway, Trout comes to Miss Catherine's evening class, but he has no interest in learning. He's disrespectful and stupid, and he's only there to put the moves on the teacher. One evening, Trout asks Miss Catherine to go for a ride with him in his new expensive motorized boat. She tells him no way. She's not interested. Yikes. Now let's get back to what's happening in modern day Camp Green Lake. At breakfast, Mr. Sir looks pretty nasty. His face is swollen and the 3 long jagged scratches down his cheek are bruised. He's more grumpy than usual. Stanley and the other boys in D-tent don't bring it up, but a boy from another tent asks Mr. Sir what happened to his face. And that was a mistake. Mr. Sir reacts violently, slamming the boy's head against a pot and dropping him to the floor. Out on the lake, the boys ask Stanley what happened to Mr. Sir, but he doesn't answer. When Mr. Sir comes by with the water truck, instead of filling Stanley's canteen, he pours the water onto the ground, leaving Stanley with nothing to drink for the rest of the day. Cruel. Now let's go back to 110 years ago. The town has a doctor named Dr. Hawthorne and an onion man named Sam, both of whom help out the townsfolk when they get sick. Sam, the onion man, walks through the town with his donkey, Mary Lou, selling onions from a secret onion patch on the other side of the lake. He gets there in a boat that he made himself. Sam's onions and the ointments and other medicines that he makes from them are said to heal all kinds of illnesses. Sam himself claims that eating raw onions leads to a long life. Sam is also good with his hands, and Miss Catherine makes a deal with him. He'll fix the leaky roof of the schoolhouse in exchange for some of her spiced peaches. He works on the room in the afternoon after school lets out. He isn't allowed to go to the evening classes with the other townsfolk because he's black. Remember, this is 110 years ago, so things were not fair or equal. There was no civil rights movement yet. Everything was segregated, and it seems really unfair because Sam seems like a pretty great guy. While Sam fixes the roof and Catherine grades her schoolwork, they get to know each other. Sam likes poetry and learning. They have a lot in common. And in fact, Miss Catherine keeps coming up with other things that need to be fixed around the schoolhouse so that she can spend more time with this guy. But one day, she can't find anything else that needs to be fixed. In a pretty sad scene, she sits crying in the empty schoolhouse, missing Sam. But then she hears him outside with Mary Lou in his onion wagon. She runs out to him, and in an oh-so-sweet moment, they realize they are in love. But the scene is quickly ruined when a townswoman sees the 2 lovebirds and she yells, "God will punish you!" Yikes. Remember back then it was illegal for people of different races to be in love and to get married. The next morning, after their big kiss, Catherine is sitting alone in the schoolhouse when a mob, led by Trout Walker, comes storming into the building. I bet he was super jealous because she wouldn't go out with him and she's in love with Sam. Well, they say awful things to Catherine. They turn over the desks, they pull the books off the shelves, and they destroy the school. Catherine escapes and runs to the sheriff's office. But when she tells him about what's happening at the schoolhouse, he doesn't even seem concerned at all. The sheriff tells Catherine that he's planning to hang Sam for kissing a white woman. But if Catherine gives the sheriff a kiss, he'll just run Sam out of town instead. Catherine is horrified. As she runs out of the office, she hears the sheriff saying, "The law will punish Sam, and God will punish you." Awful. She runs straight to Sam, who's on the banks of the lakes, hitching Mary Lou to his onion cart. She tells him that the sheriff is planning to hang him and that they have to get out of there as quickly as possible. Sam agrees, although he's sad to leave his precious Mary Lou behind. They get into Sam's boat and start rowing to the other side of the lake, but then they hear the sound of Trout Walker's motorized boat following them. I wonder what he's up to, this guy. Well, the narrator tells us what happens next. Walker's boat smashes into Sam's boat. Sam is shot and killed. Catherine is taken back to the shore. To top it all off, Mary Lou the donkey has also been killed. My heart is broken at the way this story is unfolding. Since that day, no rain has fallen on Green Lake. I wonder who God was really punishing. 3 days after Sam's death, Catherine shoots the sheriff, puts on fresh lipstick, and kisses him, starting her career as one of the most feared outlaws in all the West, kissing Kate Barlow. That's right, guys. Miss Catherine Barlow, the sweet school teacher, ends up becoming the most notorious outlaw of all. Once she kisses those men, she makes sure they never live another day. Back to modern day Camp Green Lake. 3 days after the incident with the warden, Mr. Sir is still pouring Stanley's water onto the ground when he comes by with the water truck. Luckily, when Mr. Pendanski drives the truck, he takes pity on Stanley and gives him a little extra water. X-Ray and the other boys don't like the fact that Zero is helping dig Stanley's holes. Since Zero is black and Stanley is white, X-Ray complains that the white boy sits around while the black boy does all the work. This racism theme continues in modern-day Green Lake. That day, Mr. Sir comes by with the water truck and fills Stanley's canteen with water. But then, he takes it into the truck for a minute, where Stanley can't see what he's doing, and he brings it back. Stanley wonders what Mr. Sir might have put in his water. After Stanley's been back to digging for a while, he pours the water out onto the ground so that he won't be tempted to drink it. I mean, he could have put dirt or bugs or anything in there. Meanwhile, Zero is making good progress with his reading, and he even learns to write his name. That's when we learn that Zero isn't his real name. His real name is Hector Zeroni. That name sounds really familiar. Which one of you can make the connection? Let's get back to the past. This is 20 years since Sam has been murdered. Catherine Barlow, who now goes by the name Kate Barlow, is returned to Camp Green Lake. The town is a ghost town on a ghost lake, and Kate is living in an abandoned cabin on the edge of the old lake bed. She still thinks of Sam. True love is tough to get over. One morning, who do you think shows up but Trout Walker and his wife? Trout's wife, Linda, is a freckle-faced woman with dirty, scraggly red hair. Red hair, huh? Sounds familiar. Trout and Linda have a rifle and they threaten Kate, demanding that she show them where she's buried the loot from all of her robberies. Kate refuses, telling them they can dig for the next 100 years and they'll never find it. Trout and Linda drag Kate outside. They tie her legs together and make her walk around the hot, dried-out lake, barefoot, hitting her in the back of the legs with a shovel. She still refuses to take them to where she's buried the money. At that moment, a yellow-spotted lizard suddenly leaps toward them. It lands on Kate, biting her on the ankle. Knowing she is about to die, Kate tells Trout and his wife to start digging. And then, well, she dies laughing. That is the end of our recap, boys and girls.